The plane bucked in the midnight storm, and the airman avoided eye contact. Major Zara Khan sat in a jump seat, her wrists cinched behind her. She had flown with some of these men over unforgiving deserts and bleeding cities. She knew their laughs, their coffee habits, their quiet prayers. Tonight, none of them could look at her. Her boots were still dusted with the talc-gray powder of a village whose name would not appear in any report. Coordinates had been altered, a false intelligence packet rerouting their drone to a street where children chased a ball that would not roll again. Zara had refused to sign the after-action gloss, asking why the numbers wanted to lie. She had dragged a thread and found it bound around the wrists of men with medals on their chests and stock options in their desk drawers. Off-books budgets swelled when threats were exaggerated. Casualties drive appropriations, one email had read. She followed it to a name, Brigadier Julian Reed. She had sat in Julian's office and said the word conscience without apology, and now she was cargo. The plane dipped, and thunder pressed its face against the windows. Across from her, a captain whose first broken bone she had once splinted pretended to check a manifest he couldn't read. What they were about to do to her would be written down as a necessary transfer. The widow protocol did not exist on paper, but in practice it breathed through the vents of every covert hallway. If a widow knows where the bodies are, she must be made of air. The loadmaster pulled the intercom from his collar. 5 minutes. He didn't speak her name, though he had been at her promotion ceremony. The air smelled like wet canvas and jet fuel. Zara rolled her shoulders against the webbing. The cuffs bit her palms. She thought of her mother's hands planting okra and her father's voice teaching her to thread fishing line. She filled her lungs. The ramp groaned open, and rain came in sideways. Wind rammed its fists into the cabin. The storm outside was a black animal, its ribs lit by lightning. Zara saw a blur of vehicles, blue strobes smeared by rain. They weren't landing, they were delivering. 2 men unbuckled and came toward her. Julian was not here, of course. Men like him did their killing from a distance. A memory of that afternoon's quiet brief. Zara, let's not confuse empathy with accuracy. Accuracy sent your drone to the wrong door, Zara had said. He'd smiled with the softness of a blade. You're tired. Sign the packet. Fix the numbers. We fix the world as best we can, Major. Now be a patriot. She thought of that smile as they stood her up. She did not spit or shout. An airman clipped a carabiner to the chain between her cuffs. He smelled of mint, gum, and fear. They led her down the ramp into rain, so full it felt solid. Her boots slid and caught. They pulled her toward the open bay of a waiting truck whose bed had been hosed, so recently it still glistened. 2 more men stood inside it, silhouettes against floodlights. One of them held a hood. In the thunder-bruised dark, Zara knew his shoulders by their arrogance. Colonel Victor Thorne, Julian's right hand. Major Khan, he said, making the rank sound like a crime. Regrettable situation. You changed the coordinates, Zara said. The rain made it difficult to tell if his face flinched. Children are dead, so your budget breathes easier. He put on a smile. We adapt in theater. We don't litigate it on tarmac. We don't murder our own because they remember what they swore, Zara said. The word swore cut the rain like a bright wire. He leaned closer, the hood in his hand swinging. We silver-stitched this, Major. You had a breakdown. You went home. You resigned. That's what the file says in a week if you cooperate. Or, he glanced toward the far end of the field where a black river shouldered the base. You take a swim. No file required. The river had swelled with the storm. Zara knew from briefings that the dam wore a gated spillway that could chew a tree to bone. They would cuff her to some drowned rung and tell the channel she'd been a riptide. Water made everything plausible. It was the most obedient killer. Which is it? Victor asked, as if there were choices here. The men around him pretended to check skies, shoulders, boots. Nobody wanted to be the camera that recorded this. Everybody knew they were in frame. Zara looked past him at the line of trucks, the feral gleam of rain in headlights. She pictured Julian in a warm room with coffee. reading the report that would translate this night into something that would not stain his carpet. She pictured the village street, the rubber ball that never rolled again. "Put the hood away," she said. "I want to see the country I served." Victor's jaw clenched. He handed the hood to a sergeant who stared at it as if it might bite. "Walk," Victor said. They did. Boots slapped puddles. Wind hounded the convoy. A gate wheezed open. The trucks shouldered through. The river gleamed to their left. Ahead, the dam rose, concrete slick with rain. Floodlights mounted to its crown-cut gashes of white through the night. The spillway roared. They parked near a maintenance stair that disappeared into the dam's interior workings. Victor gestured. "We'll keep this dignified." Zara thought of the men and women who had died because they trusted instructions. She thought, too, of how she had trained recruits to breathe when the cockpit felt like a coffin. She breathed now. She counted. She measured the width of the cuffs against the breadth of her wrists. She catalogued the faces. The sergeant with the hood, Sergeant Davies, gentle with dogs. The tall Private Chen, always hungry. The captain who wouldn't meet her eyes, Captain Adams, who had a photo of his daughter taped inside his locker. Nobody here was a monster. That was the horror. They had jobs, and the job had teeth. "Down," Victor said. They went into the dam. The stairwell smelled like wet concrete and electricity. The roar of water grew around them until it wasn't a sound but a pressure. At the landing 2 levels down, a door hung open to an inspection catwalk that ran along the throat of the spillway. Beyond its metal grating, water heaved and threw itself against engineered teeth. A cold mist filled the space. Victor's voice had to be shouted now. "Take off her cuffs." The sergeant hesitated. "Sir, front to back," Victor said. "Forward ring only." He held up a small chain with a lock and a carabiner. They didn't need a drowned rung. They had steel. They'd chain her wrists to the catwalk's outer rail. Sergeant Davies's hands shook as he reached for the key at his belt. Zara watched his mouth flatten. She lifted her wrists without struggle. The first cuff clicked open. The sergeant threaded the new chain through the front ring of her cuff. Then the second cuff, then the rail. A small, practiced machine. The carabiner snapped. Victor stepped back. "Major Khan, final words." She thought of final words as a trick. She looked through the mist toward the black summit of the storm. Lightning spidered there. "I'm not done," she said. He smiled. "You are. History is an obedient dog." "Then teach it a new command," she said. He glanced at Sergeant Davies. The padlock clicked. The chain tightened. Zara leaned into it. The spillway breathed out a colder breath. She saw her reflection broken into 1,000 thin faces on the rippling puddles. Behind Victor, Captain Adams finally looked at her, and what lived in his eyes was hope that she would forgive him. She gave him a look that said, "I see you." It was the only forgiveness she could afford. "Step back," Victor called to his men. "Let the river have its due." Zara exhaled and rolled her shoulders. The chain scraped. She began to count. The catwalk shivered. A surge hit the spillway's teeth and threw spray into the air. In that instant, while the mist rose like a curtain, Zara dipped her chin, hooked the inner edge of her right wrist over the rail's lip, and twisted her whole weight through her shoulder. The cuff's hinge barked across steel. Pain splintered down her arm. She used it as a map. The chain slackened a hair, then choked again. Victor stepped forward, irritation darkening his mouth. "Don't." She twisted again. Bones screamed. The hinge gave a whisper too soft for anyone to hear, but her body heard it. She surged against the slack, drove her knuckles forward, caught the lock with the meat of her hand, and shoved. The carabiner half-turned and snapped back. Sergeant Davies lunged too late. Zara let the surge shove her, threw her weight into the failure she'd made in the metal, and felt the right cuff's hinge bend a fraction more. Victor reached. Lightning cracked open the sky. "Hold her," he shouted. Zara did not wait for hands. She arched her back and drove both forearms downward. The chain bit, and then, miracle physics prayer, the right cuff sheared a notch. Not free. Not yet. Enough. She rolled her shoulder until her arm felt like a rope forced through a ring too small for the knot it carried. Then twisted again. Skin tore. Blood warmed the rein. The carabiner scraped. Sergeant Davies grabbed the chain. Captain Adams grabbed Sergeant Davies's sleeve. Victor reached for the lock. Zara lifted her chin and stepped with both feet onto the bottom rail. The catwalk had no guard for that kind of choice. The spillway below roared. The storm shoved a wet hand into her chest and dared her to fall. I said final words. Victor barked, hand on her shoulder. Zara leaned back into the chain and looked him in the eyes, her voice a small, steady lantern. I already said them. Then she threw herself forward. The chain sang a bright, surprised note. The carabiner shredded skin again, and then spat itself open. For one clean heartbeat, she was held only by the left cuff and a scrap of miracle. Body horizontal in the silver air above the spillway's teeth. She turned her wrist, felt the hinge scream, and let the storm take her. She fell into the mist, and the roar closed over her name. The fall didn't end, it changed shape. For a moment, Zara was a shard of thunder. Then the river hit her. The impact folded her in half, crushed the air from her lungs. Cold found its home in her bones. The current spun her. Instinct fought logic. Training fought panic. Stay level. Find up. She reached for the dark that felt thinner, kicked toward it, surfaced into rain that hammered her skull. The dam loomed above like the spine of a god. Light still moved along its edge. They thought she was gone. They would report body unrecoverable. She coughed water, felt blood in the salt, and turned downstream. The current wanted to keep her. She let it for a while until a branch snagged her sleeve, and she clawed at the bank. Mud gave way, but finally held. She dragged herself out, gasping until breathing became something she could trust again. Her left wrist hung wrong. The cuff was still there, bent and cracked. She used a flat stone to hammer at the hinge until it split, until skin bled freely and the weight fell away. Blood and rain washed together into the soil. The storm walked off west, muttering. She found a drainage tunnel, concrete, rusted ladder. Inside, she sat with her back to the wall and counted her pulse. The flashlight in her memory turned on. Training, escape, evasion. You always start with inventory. She had the torn uniform, the ruined cuff, a chain link, the name of everyone who had decided her death was a formality, and a mind that would not stop. At dawn, the sky looked embarrassed. Zara moved. The land beyond the base rolled out in low hills. A service road cut toward the east. She limped along it barefoot. The wind smelled of diesel, and soon she saw what she needed, a derelict maintenance shed. Inside a metal locker, a half-empty bottle of antiseptic, a torn rain poncho, and a radio the size of her hope. She cleaned the wound, bound it tight. The radio coughed static. She adjusted the frequency until a familiar whisper slipped through. Civil frequency, Rescue Coordination Network. She pressed the transmit switch and spoke a name she hadn't said in years. Hunter 7. This is Khan. Repeat. This is Khan. Static. Then a pause. Then a voice she'd know even if time had eaten half of it. Khan. That's impossible. Believe impossible things, she rasped. I need extraction. Silent channel. They think I drowned. The voice steadied, command habits falling back into place. Where? She gave coordinates that were half a lie. Bring nothing traceable. 1 seat. 30 minutes. Khan, they'll burn the air looking for you. I'll be ash by then. Just move. She killed the signal. Her breath made small ghosts in the cold. She looked at the bent cuff, rolled it between her palms, felt the shape of a key she hadn't yet found. 38 minutes later, the chop of rotor blades reached her. She stepped out, hood up. The helicopter that settled was a civilian model, unmarked. The pilot's helmet turned, visor lifting. A woman's face appeared, older, wearier, the eyes still sharp. Zara, said Commander Evelyn Chase, her one-time wing commander, you look like hell. Hell was crowded, Zara said. Evelyn reached down, hauled her in. They lifted off before words could explain what survival had already declared. Below, the dam shrank. The river coiled like a vein of memory. In the air, Zara told it fast. The files, the altered coordinates, the widow protocol. Evelyn didn't interrupt. She just flew, jaw set. "You can't go back," Evelyn said finally. "I'm not going back," Zara said. "I'm going through." They landed on an abandoned refueling pad hidden under a collapsed hangar. Inside the wreck, the world felt smaller. Evelyn found a thermal blanket, poured coffee. Zara unrolled a map, traced lines between bases. Julian used the same logistics route for 3 years. Every fake threat, every inflated report feeds into his defense contracts. The signatures repeat. If I can cross-match satellite uplinks with budget releases, I can build the trail. Evelyn watched her a long time. "You're bleeding. I'll stop later. You're talking about going up against the whole chain of command. You'll need more than proof. You'll need belief." Zara looked up, and for the first time there was a smile that wasn't meant for comfort. Belief is the easiest thing to start a war with. Outside, dawn thinned into pale gold. She used a broken laptop to start her war. Lines of code, coordinates, ghost frequencies. She rebuilt what she could from memory. She sent encrypted bursts through low-orbit satellites to old contacts, a tech sergeant in hiding, a journalist she'd once saved, an analyst too principled to stay employed. Each message said only one word: awake. By the third night, her body stopped shaking. She stood on the cracked tarmac and watched lightning far away. Evelyn came out, cigarette in hand. "You have a plan yet?" "I have a list," Zara said. "Julian, Victor, everyone who wrote my obituary. I'm going to make them famous." "You can't kill them all." "Who said anything about killing?" Zara looked at the horizon where the dark began to glow. "I'm going to make the world see them. They built their empire in the dark. Let's burn the dark." For the first time since the dam, she let herself breathe without counting. The cold air tasted like metal and sunrise. Geneva gleamed like an apology no one meant. The lake lay still beneath the weight of morning, reflecting towers of glass that held more secrets than light. Zara Khan stood among them, wrapped in an anonymous coat, hair cropped short, eyes hidden behind mirrored lenses. The world thought she was a ghost, and that was useful. The summit drew every uniform worth bribing. She passed through checkpoints with a forged ID that Evelyn's network had conjured from air. The badge called her Dr. Layla Hayes, systems analyst. The machine beeped green, polite, and let her in. The hall smelled of perfume and policy. Chandelier light made everyone beautiful. She walked among them, her pulse a measured drum. The tiny device stitched into her collar hummed alive. Evelyn's voice slipped through. "Drones in position, comms are clean, keep it circling. When I say open, you broadcast to every free frequency. Copy that. Be quick before they trace the loop," Zara murmured. She moved toward the exhibition floor where models of aircraft gleamed. At the far end of the room, Brigadier Julian Reed laughed with investors, a flute of champagne making him look human. Victor Thorne was there too, alive and unscarred, the river's ghost that never came. They believed in paperwork more than weather, and paperwork said Zara Khan was dead. She watched them through the reflection on a display screen. Her fingers brushed the small drive in her pocket. The data she'd rebuilt, spliced, verified. Every sale, every doctored strike report, every name attached to falsified deaths. Proof was no longer enough. Proof needed witnesses. A hostess passed with a tray. Zara took a glass she wouldn't drink and used the moment to slip behind a column. The ventilation shaft above hummed. She connected the transmitter. A green light blinked once. The signal crawled into the summit's internal feed like a rumor. Evelyn's voice. "We're linked." 30 seconds from full override. Zara watched Julian mount the dais, smile at the cameras. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we stand at the dawn of a safer world." She whispered, "Open." Every screen in the hall flickered. The corporate logos died. Then, one by one, the faces of the dead appeared. Civilians, soldiers, the children from the village she'd tried to save. Under each image scrolled the coordinates, timestamps, altered signatures. Julian's name repeated in the metadata like a drumbeat of guilt. At first, silence, then chaos. Reporters rose. Delegates fumbled for phones. Julian's voice cracked mid-sentence. "Cut the feed," he barked, but the feed didn't listen. Outside the hall, drones projected the same images on building facades, on clouds of mist rising from the lake. Around the world, satellite relays picked up the burst and mirrored it. The lie was global before security even found the main console. Victor saw her across the crowd. Recognition hit like a bullet. "Khan," he breathed. She moved through the confusion toward him. He drew a small pistol. She kept walking. Guards closed in but stumbled as the crowd surged. Someone screamed. The room split into panic and revelation. "Don't," she said when she was 10 feet away. Her voice carried through the hall, amplified by every stolen microphone. "You already killed enough truth." Julian pushed past reporters, face ghost white. "You think anyone will believe a traitor?" Zara lifted the drive. "They don't have to believe me. They can see you." The drone's beam slashed through the skylight, painting her in white fire. It also caught Julian square in its light. The audience turned. Phones recorded. The weight of witnesses was heavier than any bullet. Security stormed the stage. Julian lunged, but Victor froze, the pistol shaking. Zara stepped close, eyes level with his. "You could still tell the truth." "I was following orders," he whispered. "That's what they all said before the flood." She knocked the gun aside just as officers burst through the side doors. Real law enforcement, not Julian's hirelings. They swarmed the stage, seized weapons, shouted commands. Julian struggled, yelling about national interest, but the cameras didn't blink. Evelyn's voice buzzed in Zara's ear. "It's everywhere. You did it." Zara let out a breath that felt like years. "Then maybe they'll start counting the right bodies." The hall smelled of ozone and fear. Outside, sirens wept. She turned to the broken glass wall and looked out over the lake. Rain began again, gentle this time. Victor sagged in the officer's grip. "What now?" he asked, voice hollow. Zara looked past him to the horizon. "Now the world learns what loyalty costs." She walked through the wreckage and the flashing lights. Nobody stopped her. The crowd parted as if guilt itself made room. On the street, the drone drifted above her like a silver guardian before turning toward the sky and vanishing into the clouds. At the lake's edge, Zara knelt, touched the cold water with her bruised hand. Its surface rippled clear and honest. For the first time since the fall, she wasn't running. She was simply present, alive in a world that finally knew her truth. She whispered to the water. They built their empire in the dark. Now the sun's up. Behind her, the sirens faded into applause, or maybe into memory. She stood shoulders straight, wind catching her coat. The sky, once her enemy, stretched open, vast and forgiving, and Zara Khan, soldier and survivor, walked toward it, leaving footprints that even the rain could not erase.